Good evening, everyone. My name is Joanne Lee, Head of Maybank Privilege and Emerging Affluent. Welcome to the first episode of our Financial Empowerment Series brought to you by Maybank Privilege. This Financial Empowerment Series will be divided into 3 distinct parts, each focusing on different life stages and your financial needs at a given point in your life. So watch out for our upcoming episodes on Wealth Accumulator as well as Wealth Stabilizer. Today, we're going to dive right into the topic of wealth creation, which is one of the first steps in your financial planning journey. It's about generating wealth while ensuring you look out for unexpected risks and how to protect yourself in unforeseen circumstances. So it's going to be a session packed with info, but that's not all. Stay tuned until the end of the show to find out how you could stand to win a prize worth 500 ringgit and a special gift. Ladies and gentlemen, when we launched Financial Planning Series last year, we brought in experts to share tips on financing, investment, and insurance. And we're glad to be back to empower you financially so that you can attain financial independence fast and grow with us for generations to come. Without further ado, joining me today, we have 2 esteemed guests, both specialists in their own right, to talk about how we can get you started on wealth creation with some investment and insurance solutions. Please welcome Mr. Tan Wei Yin, Head of Client Portfolio Modeling at Maybank Group Wealth Management, and Ms. Tay Yi Ling, Head of Channel Development at Etika Life Insurance Berhad. Welcome.
Good evening, Joanne.
Good evening. So let me get the session started by directing the first question to you, Wei Yin. So when we talk about wealth creation and we look at the young adults that we have, and most of our audience are young adults today, many know that they have to invest their hard-earned income, right? But yet a lot of them wonder if they have enough money, or they think that investment is usually requiring a large sum of capital, or some of our audience may not even know how to get started. So Wei Yin, what are your thoughts on this, and how should our audience really get started? How and when should they get started on wealth creation?
Okay, before we even go into the topic of investments, right, I want to stress on the importance of having an emergency fund, right? So when you first start out, as a fresh graduate, you enter the society, chances are your savings are quite limited most of the time. So the first job is really to set up an emergency fund. And by emergency fund, we mean something that you have immediate access to. In terms of liquidity, you can access to it whenever the circumstances arises. And the recommended amount that we recommend the people to set aside is usually 6 months worth of their living expenses, right?
Right.
So once you have set that up, then only you have some spare liquidity which you can deploy into investment assets. When it comes to deciding how much to save and whatnot, right, you will have to actually tabulate your budgeting accordingly. So you will have your monthly fixed expenses, you will have the variable expenses. So you have to lay those down accordingly. And I can't stress more about the importance of savings, right? A lot of people focus on how much returns I need to get from my investment portfolio.
That's very true.
What kind of investment scheme that I need to look out for, right? But the matter fact is, the things that you can control is actually your savings capacity. So, for instance, we have 2 individuals, Farah and Putri, right? Farah is a better investor compared to Putri, but Putri is able to save more compared to Farah. 10 years down the road, right? Putri, who are able to invest more consistently, set aside more of her own income, will actually have a better outcome compared to Farah, right? So once you have gotten those savings amount, emergency funds set up, the next step is really to look for investment instruments. And there are a lot of investment instruments out there that have their own risk-reward profiles. So we think for mature investors, for new investors, a good place to start is really unit trust, right? There are a lot of benefits associated with unit trust, but there are three primary benefits that I think investors can focus on. The first one is actually the low capital requirement, affordability, in other words, right? A lot of people tend to have the general misperception that you need a huge sum of capital to start investments, but that is not the truth today. With as low as 100 ringgit, you can actually kickstart your investment journey already. So that's number one. Number two, when it comes to unit trust, it's actually an investment vehicle that gathers pool of funds from different investors, and it is managed by a fund manager, right? So the fund manager will take the pool of funds, go into the market, and invest in securities issued by different companies. And even with 100 ringgit, you already have diversification benefits through unit trust. And more importantly, being new to the investment world, you will have fund manager to actually guide you through this investment journey, and that is actually something that is very helpful for new investors.
Wow, that is really a lot of information, even just for the first question. So that makes sense. You actually say, we can start now, cultivate a certain savings habit and monitor your expenses and make sure you invest, right?
Yes.
With the recommended unit trust.
Yep.
So maybe I will turn around and ask Yiling instead. So many of our audience, right, being young adults, they don't really look at the topic of insurance. It's usually seen as a taboo, right? And most people will say, I'm young, so why do I need it? It's not something for me. So, Yiling, as a young adult, right, after listening to what Wei Yin has shared, what are your views on this, and how should insurance play a part in the wealth creation journey?
Well, it's all about striking a balance between investment and protection. So obviously, investment is a good tool for us to gain potential return. But a good insurance plan will be of great help when we face unexpected situations such as sickness, accidents, or even hospitalization. Yeah? So take it for example, for the young adults out there, especially when we are accumulating our wealth, right, it is very important that we also have a very good medical plan. So, otherwise, when we are faced with a huge medical bill, when we are faced with accident, we are injured, we fall sick, we have to be hospitalized, and the medical bill, let's say, comes up to a couple of thousands or even 10, 20,000. Yeah. So how are we going to fund for it? So if that's the case, then probably we will need to force liquidate our investment or to withdraw our deposit, burst our credit card limit, and the worst is to take a personal loan just to pay off the medical bill. Yeah. So in fact, in Malaysia, the medical inflation rate is rather high. Yeah? It ranges between 10 to 15% every year. So in fact, last year itself, in the year 2020, the medical inflation rate in Malaysia is as high as 14%. So without a doubt, medical cost is going to increase year-on-year basis. Yeah? So that's why insurance is something that we need to get it, especially when we are still young and healthy. So we can get through the underwriting a lot more easier when we are young and healthy, and the premium will be relatively lower. Hence, instead of viewing it as a taboo, I would say that it is actually a very good financial planning tool that will help us to protect our investment as well as saving.
Absolutely. You raise very good points here, because a lot of our young adults, and myself included, we don't normally think about these things, right? So you raised something very important, and I just wanted to bring it back to a scenario, right? So you said that earlier when Wei Yin showed a chart, I remember seeing Farah, right? So Farah, suppose Farah is a young adult earning about 5,000 ringgit a month, right? And so for someone like Farah, normally her employers would cover her for medical benefits, right? So actually, for someone like her, does she still need an insurance plan or a medical plan since her employers are already covering her?
Well, generally, if we are under employment, we will usually be covered by some kind of insurance provided by our employers, right? So a good question that we need to ask ourselves is, do we know how much we are covered? And also, what kind of coverage are we having? Yeah. So the rule of thumb for insurance coverage will be actually at least 10 times of our annual income. So take Farah as an example. If she's earning 5,000 a month, in a year, she will be earning 60,000. So 10 times, her life coverage should be around 600,000. Yeah? So that is the adequate amount that she should have. So on top of this, right, we will also need to look into, if we solely rely on our employer's coverage. So what happens if we plan to change jobs? So during the transition, we take a short holiday, we go back to our hometown. So during that kind of period, we will not have any coverage. Yeah. So I will say that, having an insurance plan for ourselves, it's actually very necessary because it will actually complement whatever coverage that the company is providing to us.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I think that is also something that we should really think about, because very often people just think that if I'm employed, then the employer covers it, right? But that's not necessarily the case. Now, bringing back to the topic that you brought up earlier, you mentioned that customers can actually start saving as low as 100 ringgit, start saving or investing, lah, right? So can this 100 ringgit really generate that sort of investments that some of us are really hoping to achieve and at a certain period of time?
Okay, I think let's not belittle 100 ringgit, right? Let's just do a simple math. 100 ringgit a month, 3 years, I think you will be able to fund yourself a new laptop already, right? And we know the importance of gadget, especially through this pandemic period, right? So the real question is really on how we want to plan ahead for different kind of aspiration that we want. So I think everyone here will eventually reach a retirement age. So what's the kind of a retirement lifestyle that you are looking for? Some people would want to retire in a city. Some people would prefer rural areas. Some people want to retire overseas. So different individuals will have different aspirations, different dreams, and all of these lifestyle choices, decision, financial goals, they all have price to it. They all have a number attached to it, right? So it's really boils down to how the individual wants to plan ahead for what they want, right? So chances are for bigger milestones, such as purchasing a house, preparing for a retirement, those milestones will require more planning, more time, and eventually you will need to commit more capital for it, right?
Right.
So for example, let's say a fresh graduate
Right.
would plan to have his first automobile, right? First car. And if you want to break that down as an example, you actually need to define what kind of car models you're looking at, what are the variant, and at the time of purchase, you will have to imagine, go through the process of, meeting an agent. What's the agent cost? What's the commission like? What's the price? And other administrative costs like road tax, insurance, whether or not there's touch-up effort required or not. So when it comes to planning, set the goal, right? Break down the goal into individual components, right? Assign numbers to it and work backwards to calculate how much commitment you need to give, what are the savings that you need to strain out of your budget. That is usually how we will advise people to go about.
Right. So it's about really understanding what you want to achieve,
Yep.
what your financial goals and needs are.
Yep.
So then let's say they have a number to it. And in your example, I want to buy a car and I know I need to have 80,000 or something like that. So when it comes to the aspect of investments, right, to get there, do they need to just put all their money in a basket? Like, people often say, don't put all your eggs in one basket, right?
Yes.
So how should they actually go about this, right? Do they diversify? And does diversification mean just having a vast number of investments?
Okay, I think to emphasize the benefits of diversification, just imagine yourself in different market scenarios, right? Imagine the grief that you feel looking at markets going up and you're not in it, right? On the other hand, when the market took a turn, right, went south and you're
I'm
completely
glad I'm
in it.
not in it.
Yeah. So there's a lot of emotions involved when it comes to investment, and we really want to take that out of the equation. So how do we help ourselves to avoid this kind of emotional pitfall? And the answer to it is actually diversification,
Right.
And how do we exactly do diversification? Is through different kind of investment instruments, right? Particularly within stocks, within bonds. These two are the main traditional asset classes that investors have access to today. So stocks generally will have higher potential return, but they entail higher risk. And when it comes to bonds, they are generally more resilient in nature to market shocks. They give you fixed coupons on a periodic basis, but they are not as lucrative, in terms of potential returns compared to stocks. So when it comes to diversification, it's really aligning your portfolio, the mix of those investment instruments to your risk profile. If you are conservative investors, you actually have more bonds, those risk-free assets within your portfolio. And if you are more aggressive, risk-seeking kind of investors, you would have more stocks, more equities, more asset classes that have higher risk and higher potential returns.
I see. I see. So the different asset classes that you look at will, and how much you put in it will really depend on the risk profile of the
Yes.
customer. Lah,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
So coming back to Yiling, right? And you really spoke about a topic that I truly believe in also, right? So medical insurance and critical illness plans. People often talk about that, but what is the difference? It's not the same thing, we know, right? So maybe you can break it down to the audience. What's the difference between a medical plan and a critical illness plan?
Well, a very simple explanation is that a medical plan helps us to pay our medical bill when we are hospitalized. Yeah. So with that, right, we get to enjoy the top-notch medical treatment, focus on recovery. So we do not need to, thinking of should I withdraw my deposit, should I liquidate my investment, just to fund for the medical bill. Yeah. And a critical illness plan whereby pay us a lump sum of money if we are diagnosed with any of the covered illnesses. Yeah. So this lump sum of money will then help us, because when we are diagnosed with any of the illnesses, we might not be able to work anymore. Yeah.
That's
So
right.
this lump sum of money will then help us to probably fund our daily expenses, or probably pay off some of our loans. If our kids are studying, we need to fund for the education fee. So that payment of money will then be very useful when it comes to dealing with all these day in, day out expenses. So you can see that both plans have their own beauty in it. Yeah. So depending on what kind of needs do we have before we decide whether we want to take out a medical plan or a CI plan.
Right.
Yep.
And what do you look out for when you consider an insurance medical plan or a critical illness plan? Typically,
For medical plan, we definitely have to look at the room and board.
Right.
Yeah, as well as the overall annual limit or lifetime limit, because that very much determine what kind of room type will we be staying in a hospital if we are hospitalized,
Yep.
and also how much will the insurance cover my bill up to. So in fact, other than that, right, we also need to look into a few different features. So we often hear about deductible. Yeah, a medical plan with deductible, say 5,000. So take Farah as an example. Yeah, if she is having a medical plan with deductible 5,000, if she is hospitalized, so the first 5,000 she will then have to pay by herself,
Right.
and the rest of the bill, her medical plan will be able to pay for her. So where does she find the 5,000? She then can use the employer coverage
Right.
to actually fund that 5,000. So effectively, she's paying nothing, right? So the second thing that we often hear about is co-payment. Yeah, in a medical bill, in a medical plan, if we talk about co-payment, usually is we ourselves pay 10% and it's capped at a limit. Then the rest, the medical plan will pay. So the third type will be some kind of medical plan that provides full coverage, yeah? Meaning to say we do not need to pay anything. So entirely paid by the insurance plan. So the one that we have at Maybank will be a medical plan with these features. Yeah? So it's fully covered with an annual limit up to 2.3 million, and there is no lifetime limit. So the room and board is up to 500 ringgit. So with that, right, it's very much enough for us to stay in a comfortable private hospital and receive top-notch medical treatment. Whereas for CI plan, critical illness plan, other than the covered amount, we also need to find out, are we covered with 36 CI, 39 CI, 68, early stage cancer or female-specific illnesses. Yeah. Right. So again, at Maybank, what we have is actually we have different solutions. So one of them will be covering 68 critical illness.
68.
Yeah, and also some other solutions such as a plan which cover early stage cancer as well. So both of these plans are very comprehensive.
Yeah, I think Yiling pointed out a very important illustration because earlier on we were speaking about savings, right?
Yes.
So imagine you save up, very diligently, full discipline, And eventually, because we will never know when catastrophic
Yeah.
events will happen,
Yeah,
right?
no
And
one
when that
can predict.
happens, if that derails me from my financial plan, that would be very painful. And I think Eileen give a right point is that by isolating a part of your budget into insurance, you can actually transfer a lot of these risks, financial risks, to the insurance company, which
Yep.
is very effective.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, and especially you mentioned now that 60 over critical illnesses, right?
Yes.
That's quite a huge number. Yeah, so it's taken a moment for me to really ponder and reflect on that.
Yep.
So coming back to Wei Yin, right? Now, suppose I have, let's say, money ready to deploy, lah, right? I've got some money ready to deploy. Should I actually invest this sum, like a lump sum, or should I actually go for a regular investment, a regular savings investment plan?
Okay, I think the potential source of this question coming from investors, right, usually is the concern whether after they have made the investments and market took for a, worse turn, maybe the market trended downwards because of some catastrophic event and whatnot. From a financial planning standpoint, right, lump sum investment or regular saving plan, it really depends on which method works for you. For some investors, they prefer doing it at one go. For some investors, they actually prefer it to be deducting from their account on a regular basis. So within the investment landscape, we know that market tends to trend higher over the long term. So even if you are lump sum investors, right, if your investment horizon is long enough, you need not to be worried too much about those market corrections in the near term because your horizon is sufficiently long. It allows you to sit out those volatile periods.
Right.
Right. When it comes to regular saving plan, it has an added advantage because it calculates your saving method. It allows you to stay invested, be it good times or bad times. So each method really has their own benefits as well as it ties back whether or not investors prefer to do it otherwise. Yeah.
Right. So it really just depends on the actual individual,
Correct.
right? Their
Yes.
preference, right?
Yes.
And so far, that's what I hear from both of you also, even when selecting insurance plans or even when choosing an investment that is suitable. So investments, you're looking at their risk profile, and it also depends on what they're comfortable with. And then for insurance, it's not a one size fit all, and it's actually quite a lot of things to consider, right?
Yep.
Let's go back to healing, right? And because you were talking about medical plans and also critical illness, right?
Yep.
And then a thought also occurred to me, lah. In the pandemic now, like COVID, right? So some people are also hospitalized and incur certain medical expenses as a result.
Yep.
So currently, do our plans actually cover medical bills related to COVID?
At Etika, for our medical plan customers, we do cover their hospital bill when they are hospitalized due to COVID. So not only that, for our customers, right, if they are having very serious side effect after vaccination and they need to be hospitalized due to the side effect, we will also cover their medical bill.
Wow,
Yes.
that is truly very good to hear because
Very free, I would say.
yeah, it's very free.
Yes, yes.
And not many people would actually cover that.
Yes,
as
and
know.
especially when more and more people are actually having this kind of situation. So we will think that by providing the medical coverage for them will be actually helping them a lot.
Yeah. So other than medical and also critical illness plans, right? What advice would you give our audience here today? Most of whom are very young. What advice would you give to them when they are selecting what's actually the right policies for them?
Well, there are many different types of insurance policy available out there. You probably have heard of endowment plans,
Oh, yes.
savings plans, medical plans, a lot. So sometimes we can get overwhelmed by those options, right? But before we even look at what kind of solutions we want to go into, the very important part is we have to know what is our unique needs. Yeah? Each and every one of us might have a different need. Just to quote a few, if you are the bread winner of the family, you might be thinking about income replacement, income
That's right.
protection. If we are very concerned about medical bills, which is increasing every now and then. So we can actually look for medical coverage. So if we are planning to go for early retirement, we might want to plan for retirement, right? So there are a lot of different needs that we need to actually look for. Yeah. So in fact, before we come to understanding what kind of needs we have, so that we can actually move on to selecting the solutions, at Maybank, we actually have an app called Etika Virtual Insurance Advisor. We name it EVIA. Yeah? So this app will actually be able to help us to perform a financial portfolio analysis. So the professional licensed advisor at Maybank will be able to assist us to take into consideration our assets, our liabilities, existing plans that we have, and also what is our budget, and what kind of plans should be our top priority at this point of our life. So with that analysis, right, we will then be able to find out what is the protection gap that we have at the moment and get the most recommended solutions.
Right. So the app will actually make it a whole lot easier to identify which would be relevant to
Exactly.
the customer based on their unique needs, as
Exactly,
as you
yes.
mentioned, right? Yeah. So that's good because I think there's just a lot of insurance policies out there. So it's not just a single policies that would fit everyone, right?
Yep.
So that's very good insights that you have given. Now, I'd like to move back to Wei Yin, right, and really pick your brains on this. Now, a lot of us are on social media platforms, and every other day we probably get a lot of advertisements, right?
Yep.
And these advertisements usually tell us that if you invest with them, they promise certain returns which are actually very attractive, very attractive returns, and probably for just a short investment horizon, right? So what are your thoughts on this? I mean, is this legit, and what should customers actually look out for?
I think as a consumer, right, social media consumer, there's a lot of ad posts coming by, especially when it comes to investment content. There are two red flags that you can be aware of. The first red flag is promising returns. Within the investment landscape, nothing is guaranteed. As long as someone starts to promising you returns, giving you some fixed kind of a number every certain period, you need to be very, very of that. Right? Number two is that they tend to say that the investment scheme is very limited choices, right?
Yes.
Limited time, please subscribe now, those kind of things.
Yes.
Those are the number one red flag that we usually will come across also. So as a consumer, how should you verify investments? How should you check whether or not these are legitimate schemes or not?
Right.
First and foremost, there are two regulatory entities that governs two activities in Malaysia. First is Bank Negara Malaysia, where they governs the deposit space. So in order to collect people's money, you need a license for it, right? Number two is on Securities Commission Malaysia. They govern the investment landscape within Malaysia. So if you want to manage money for people, you want to invest for people, you have to go through the regulatory landscape by Security Commissions Malaysia. So you can actually go to these entities' websites, these regulators' websites, to check whether or not the company that you are planning to invest in, right, or even invest with, right, or even the investment schemes, whether or not they are listed as an approved investment scheme within those websites, or even approved financial scheme, right? So that would be a good place to start for the consumers to protect themselves.
Yeah, that's very important. And I think it's very good that you actually share with our audience just how to look out for some of these red flags.
Yep.
And so don't
Chances
believe
are-
everything you see, right?
Correct. Don't believe everything you see. And I think there's an old saying, right? If it's too good to be true, it probably is. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, I actually do see some questions flowing in from the audience. Maybe we can start looking at some of these questions, and maybe we can answer some of the questions that our audience may have, right? So the first question, I'll actually direct that to you. So it says that unit trust is a slow investment. How long do I need to invest in it? And what do you recommend if I want something faster?
Okay, unit trust is a very diverse kind of investment instruments. You can invest in local stocks, you can get exposure into foreign stocks, you can get exposure in different kind of assets. And the return profiles in terms of horizon, some can be very exciting, or in other words, very volatile, and some can be very resilient, means very stable. So it depends on what kind of investment that you have chosen within your unit trust portfolio. And usually why it takes time for people to garner investment returns, because underlying, ultimately you are investing in a company, and company represents businesses, represents corporate activities, profits, and businesses need time to grow.
Right.
Yeah, so that is something that I think as an investor you need to take note of. If something that can go high, give you very exciting returns within a very short period of time, it has the equal potential to go the other way around as well. So we have to be wary about that. So to avoid yourself being emotional when it comes to managing your investment portfolios, it's very good to fall back to the point that we shared earlier. Have a diversified portfolio, right? Understand what you are investing in.
Right. Very good advice. Now, I also have another question. This one is on insurance. And I think it's a very relevant question because it's often asked. So to Yiling, right, if I have a plan which was bought a long time ago when I was still a teenager, right, should I cancel the plan and buy a new one?
Well, usually these kind of situations is probably our parents have bought us a plan when we were much younger,
Yep.
right? So before we look at whether or not we should cancel it or buy a new one, first thing first is we need to understand what plans we are having. So is, did our parents buy that for our education, for medical, or for pure savings? Yeah. So we need to actually look into what kind of plan is that, and also how much is the coverage. So as I keep mentioning earlier, the protection amount that we have should be adequate according to our income, our expenses, our commitment, our responsibility, as well as our affordability. Yeah? So I would not say should we cancel or should we buy a new one, but I would definitely recommend whoever out there who are having this kind of situation to get someone to review your entire coverage for you. So with my current financial situation, with all the policies that I'm currently having, so do I have a gap? Do I need to fill up this protection gap? So which area am I lacking? So I need to gather all this information before we decide, should we cancel the plan or should we buy a new one? So doing a proper policy review will be very useful.
Policy review.
Yep.
Okay, so it's again once again not a situation where it's a yes no answer.
Yep.
Always review and check whether you have any protection gaps,
Exactly.
right, and that you need something else. This is an interesting one for Wei Yin.
So I want to know also.
How do you know if the fund is good? So I'm presuming this is a unit trust fund. So
Okay.
how do you know if a unit trust fund is good?
Okay, I'm just going to borrow some of the phrase that you mentioned earlier, right? It depends. Really, I think within the financial planning landscape, there's a lot of personalization involved. There's a lot of different things involved, and that is why it's very hard for us to have a very straightforward answer. And I believe that is also why it's a professional industry, right? So to answer how to know if the fund is good, first and foremost, you got to go back to the fund that you are invested in, right? Find out what is it invested with.
Right.
It could be a local equity fund. It could be a fund that is invested in technology companies, right? Then you compare the performance against the benchmark, against the investment universe. So for instance, if you're invested in a local equity fund, chances are you will utilize a local index like the FBM KLCI as a benchmark. If you're invested in a tech space, chances are you will utilize NASDAQ, the US technology index, as a benchmark. So that is step one, right? There's other funds available within the industry also. So if you want to know whether or not you're invested in the best-in-class fund that is available within the market, chances are you will need to do a peer-to-peer kind of comparison also. So there is quite a lot of technicalities involved, right? And if you are facing difficulties, we will actually advise you to approach a professional, someone that has experience within the investment industry or even the unit trust industry in particular, so that they can give you a proper insight in terms of how the fund is doing, whether or not you should switch them out, whether or not you should do a rebalancing. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's always help when people need it.
Yes,
Right?
exactly.
So it's not always just you and you alone that have to figure things out. So there will be advisors that can come along and actually give you that sort of insights, right? So that's good. Yiling, I think this one sounds like another insurance-related question.
Okay.
And I think this is often asked, especially for our young viewers who's thinking of buying a house. So the question is, if I want to buy a house, should I consider MRTA or life insurance? What's the difference?
Well, again, a very simple explanation is that MRTA covers our loan outstanding. Yeah. So take it for example, if I have a mortgage loan of 500,000, and if I buy an MRTA worth 500,000 coverage, so if anything happened to me, my MRTA plan will help me to pay the bank
Right.
my mortgage outstanding. So then my house is fully paid off in that case, and I can, treat it as a legacy for my family members or future generations. So for MRTA, we often hear about people talking. I have a mortgage loan of 500,000, but I don't want to buy an MRTA 500,000 coverage. I buy probably only 200,000.
Yes.
So that will be, exposing ourselves to a great risk, because we will be thinking that, hey, I have MRTA, but in actual fact, the coverage amount is not enough to fund the outstanding if anything happened to me. So effectively, that doesn't really help our family much if we are gone. They still have to actually find ways to fund the house. Yeah.
Yep.
So another situation is the term.
Right.
So for example, my mortgage loan is 30 years. Yeah. So I probably buy an MRTA only for 10 years.
Right.
So that is also a mismatch. So after 10 years, what if unfortunate incidents happen after 10 years, say on year 11 onwards, then I'm not covered
Because of
anymore,
the-
because of the gap.
That gap.
So that's for MRTA. So whereas for life insurance, basically, if I have a life insurance worth 500,000, and when I'm gone, the insurance company will pay this 500,000 not to the bank, but to my beneficiary. So in this case, probably my family members. And they will then have to decide whether they want to use this money to pay off whatever debts that I have, or they want to keep the money for, say, future living expenses, or to fund my kids' education, to get the family ready, for the continuous living expenses that will come. So there's a difference between MRTA and also life insurance. So talking about which one should I go for if I want to buy a house?
Yes.
Again, if you were to ask me, I would say both are equally important, because obviously you can see that they serve different purpose altogether. One is covering my loan, one is covering myself.
Right.
So again, go back to our affordability, and also what kind of income needs that we need to have if I'm no longer around, that is sufficient to actually fund my family expenses.
But I would suppose the price or the premium for both would be different.
Will be different, yes. For
see.
MRTA, generally it will be slightly cheaper, but again, it depends on age and our health situation as well.
Right.
Yep.
Thanks, Yiling. This next question should be for Wei Yin, right? So a lot of people know about the need to save. So why can't everyone achieve that? And what's actually stopping them? This is a
Okay.
very good question.
I think this is quite personal also, right? Because everyone's circumstances are quite different. I think most of the time it's probably having a too rigid kind of budget, right? Because when it comes to managing personal finances, usually we have a fixed set of expenses. It could be our utility bills, things that, cost remains fixed. And there's the variable part. And the variable part is usually the tricky one. You have your entertainment, you have your food and beverages,
Yes.
and different things that pop up randomly throughout your life, right? So when it comes to planning for a budget, my advice is stay flexible, don't be too rigid about it. Have some room when it comes to planning ahead, right? Because it's very important for you to fall in or even price in some of the uncertainty. Sometimes you will have two friends, birthday in the same month. So that means two birthday parties, right? 2 months down the road, your father's birthday present, those kind of things. So it's very hard for you to have an onset without monitoring your existing expenses. So personally, I do track my own personal expenses.
As in, you put it in an Excel sheet?
I have an app for it, right? Fortunately, so I do that on a regular basis. So when I plan for my budget for the year, right, I will actually look back into my historical expenses
Right.
and notice or pay attention to those weird things that pop out of nowhere. And I will actually set aside a budget to accommodate those situations. Otherwise, when it comes to savings or building a habit, if you don't prepare for all these things, it kind of derail your momentum, and it's very hard for you to build up a habit when you always cannot follow to your plan. Yeah.
So it kind of reminds me of what you mentioned earlier, right? You always have to start your wealth creation journey. You got to plan it out, what it is that you want to save for. So in this instance, you also need to be very disciplined and monitor what your spendings are.
That works for me, but for some people, they can actually not do that, and still able to save. So it really boils down to different styles, but you have to find a method that suits you. But the main message is don't be too rigid about it. Have some flexibility, have some room.
Yeah, I suppose it all makes sense. Again, back to the respective individual, right? So you just got to be very disciplined in monitoring your expenses, making sure you have actually money left to save and to invest and to ensure you're sufficiently protected.
Yes,
Right.
definitely.
Right. I do have another question out there from our viewers. Are there any investment and insurance recommendations for first jobbers out there?
Well, probably I can start first. Yeah.
Sure.
So for first jobbers out there, as we mentioned, a few things that we probably want to look at is, if I'm relying on my company coverage, whether or not the coverage is enough.
Right.
Yeah. So if I look at it and I realize that I need, when I am hospitalized, I don't think this is enough for my operation, for my a couple of nights stay in the hospital, then the first thing that I need to look at is a medical plan. And for all of us, I think we know, right? A medical plan, it will be, the younger we are, the cheaper it is going to be. So it is always a good choice to start with if we are looking at a first plan that we want to buy for ourselves as first jobber. Other than that, we can also, echoing to what Wayne has mentioned, if we want to start saving, we can put aside some money into saving plans as well. Yeah, there are certain saving plans that can actually cultivate our saving habits. Yeah, so we can always start small by putting aside a little bit of money into saving plans as well. So maybe those are some of the solutions that we can start with.
From investments perspective?
Okay, I wouldn't come from investment perspective. I think I come from savings perspective. That's a better approach, right? Back to what we have mentioned in the earlier session, have an emergency fund. That is very essential, right? A lot of people view savings as a power to buy something, a power to handle different circumstances. But if you look at another angle, it's the power of choice. You have a choice when you have more savings, right? As a first jobber out there, probably you are not even in the first job or in your dream job, right? You are still exploring, you are still deciding whether or not this job suits me, that kind of thing. So having an emergency fund set up, it gives you those kind of flexibility. You don't have to be too worried about, not having the next paycheck. You are not able to meet the living expenses that you require. So once you have done that, once you have settled that, then only you move on to investments. And when it comes to investments, start slow, right? Don't go for fancy, lucrative things, right? Make sure you understand what you're investing in, what you're buying in, right? That is the most, I think, important advice that we will actually provide to the first job seekers.
Yes. So always remember to have some savings, right? Don't spend all your money away.
Yeah.
Okay, we have another question. How do I choose between regular savings plan, which is offered by insurance providers and also unit trust providers? So, Wayne, would you like to?
Yeah, probably I can shed some light, and later on, Eileen, you see if you have any additional comments. So insurance provider, they provide regular savings plan through endowment plans or even retirement plans, right? It allows you to put in a sum of money on a periodic basis. And once you reach a certain maturity period, you will have a sum of money that is, credited back to your bank account. So there are different clauses attached to them, and it really boils down to whether the individual prefers those kind of savings method. And for unit trust, it's a lot more flexible,
Right.
right? There's no lock-in period, there's no redemption cost most of the time, right? And it allows you to have different amount. So you can fluctuate your contributions depending on whether or not you have excess savings capacity during that period of time. So back to the, depends. It depends
Right.
on the personal preferences and the lifestyle that they prefer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so adding on to that, right, I would like to share that for insurance solutions, right, for example, in this case, regular saving plan. So this kind of plan actually doesn't only cultivate saving habits because it actually shape our discipline savings. Yeah? It's
Right.
usually a medium to long-term commitment. And for insurance plan with a regular savings element in it, right, usually it is not only focusing on regular saving. It will definitely come with some kind of protection along the way. Yeah? So that is the main difference between an insurance regular saving plan versus a unit trust. Yeah? So because the regular saving plans, we save regularly, yeah, and then we get certain amount of return. And at the same time, we will be protected by some kind of insurance with these plans. Whereas unit trust, I would say that it gives us probably potentially higher return, but it doesn't really have the coverage part in it.
So from the insurance perspective, that's typically what some people would call the investment-linked policies.
It could be investment-linked policy. It could be some endowment plan whereby I pay for a certain number of years, and after that, then I get something back from the plan regularly. It
Right.
could be that type of solutions as well.
Right.
Yep.
Quite a few choices and quite a few subtle differences.
Yes.
Right. So next question is also something that is in a lot of our minds, right? So with the interest rate so low and markets so volatile and currency is in not a good shape, right? So how do I start investing and where do I begin?
Okay. There's a lot
It's a loaded question.
There's a lot
Ian.
of puzzles here, moving parts here, right? The market, let's just address the market first. Market is always volatile, right? Because on a daily basis, there's different news coming in, there's different development, economic developments coming in, and investors, market participants are pricing in those changes, and that is why you see, prices go up and down. Market is always volatile, but what can investors do to prepare themselves to handle this volatility is to have a longer horizon, right? Because earlier on we have actually shared a graph. Markets tends to trend higher over the long term, but it's not a very smooth journey. It goes up, it goes down, but over the long term it tends to trend higher. So to handle volatility, it's really have a sufficiently long investment horizon to allow you to see out those tough times.
Right.
Right.
Not try to time it, right?
Yeah, don't try to time the market because it's nearly impossible to do so. And when it comes to currency in such a bad shape, okay, this is, I think, speaking from a ringgit perspective, unit trust allows you to invest overseas, right? Invest overseas meaning your currency, when you place your ringgit assets with the fund manager will actually convert your ringgit assets to the relevant home currencies, usually US dollar, and invest in foreign shares.
Right.
So in other words, by investing in foreign assets, there are chances where you can hedge off some of your ringgit risk. So that is one way to do it. And where to start? Again, unit trust is actually a good place to start because you have different options there. You can invest overseas, you can invest locally. You are not stuck here. That's the flexibility. Sitting here, right here now in Malaysia, KL, you can actually invest in New York, right, in UK, or even in
Exactly.
Japan.
Yep.
Right? There's a global reach when it comes to unit trust, and it's really affordable. So I would actually recommend them to get started there.
Then the follow-up question to that, which I can see, is are we guaranteed to get returns when we invest? I heard unit trust is a good place to start. So somebody is agreeing and have actually heard what you said. So, but the question is, are we guaranteed to get returns when we invest?
Unfortunately, no, you are not guaranteed to get returns when you invest. But there are some things that you can do to help you to increase the probability of getting returns. And those involves a lot of homework, studying what kind of unit trust you're investing in, what do they invest in, what are the underlying securities, whether or not their prospects are good or not. Because ultimately, you are putting your money with a fund manager, and the fund manager is taking that pool of money to buy into companies, buy into economies, countries that have growth potential.
Right.
They have growth potential. So it really boils down to that. And over the long term, why markets tend to trend higher? It is because of population growth, right? It's because of inflation. It is also because of productivity. So economy can grow, it's due to increasing profits, increasing output. And all of these are the function of the three elements that I mentioned earlier. And that is why market tends to trend higher over the long term. But you're not guaranteed to get returns because within unit trust, the fund manager manages your money, right? So there's also the uncertainty element lying within the fund manager. So before you invest, one thing to do is before you invest in a unit trust, the first thing to do is to evaluate whether the fund is good or not, whether or not there's a performance track record that you can refer to, whether or not the fund manager is consistent, or the fund manager is just being lucky. Yeah. So there are a few aspects to this.
Right. Seek professional advice otherwise.
Yes.
Okay, and maybe this question, I think both of you might be able to help our audience here. How often should I review my financial plan if I set 5 years to reach my goal? Maybe Yiling, would you like to have a stab at it?
Well, I will actually speak from insurance point of view, yeah. So probably because insurance is part of financial plan as well, yeah. So how often should I review my policies, my total coverage? Usually, in normal situation, we suggest, everybody to do their policy review at least once a year, okay. But on top of that, whenever there are life-changing incidents happening, it is also important for us to grab the opportunity to review what we are having. Now, for example, if I have just found a new job, I have a salary jump, I got promoted, let's say. So my responsibility is different, my income is different, I need to then quickly review my coverage. Another situation is probably I have bought a car, I have bought a house, I have just got married, and very importantly, I have a baby, newborn baby, or probably my parents have just retired lately, So all these life-changing incidents will definitely impact our entire financial planning. And very importantly, insurance, coverage, protection is part of our financial planning as well. So I would say that, it should be a yearly basis, but it also not to forget to review whenever we have life-changing incidents happening along the way.
I think for investments is roughly the same as what Yiling had mentioned. Our recommended period to at least review your portfolio is once a year, at least once a year. You can do it more frequent, but minimum once a year. A lot of people tend to, have those kind of autopilot mode, buy it, invest it, and forget it. So don't do that, right? Review your portfolios regularly, at least once a year, but our recommended will be quarterly or even semi-annually. That would be more appropriate. And the important things to look at will be in terms of the performance, whatever that you're investing in, how is it performing? Is it in line with what the market is behaving? If it's in line, then chances are it's still okay. If it's not in line, then probably you need to probe further whether or not there's an issue with the fund manager, there's an issue with the investments that you're invested in. So this will actually allow you to maintain a frequent touch with your financial plans. And this practice is not limited to 5 years plan only, right?
Right.
It is equally applicable to 3 years plan, 10 years plan. So you will need to practice this when it comes to managing your investments as well as your insurance policies.
I see. Thank you for your views. I'm actually very happy to see all the questions streaming in. However, I do have something else that I want to share with our audience in the time that we have left. So this is very much related to the 500 ringgit prize and special gift that you can win. So for those of you who would like your questions to be answered, do drop us your contact details or email us at gwm.marketing@maybank.com, and we will respond accordingly, right? So this marks the end of our discussion on how to get started on your wealth creation journey. We hope you have gained some valuable knowledge and takeaways from our experts, and that you are really motivated to get your financial planning started. Remember, as shared by Wei Yin and also Yiling, we should start planning early, and we should inculcate that savings habit. Monitor your expenses and make sure to diversify your investments into instruments that are suitable to your risk profiles. And you should review your insurance needs with coverage. As a rule of thumb, 10 times your annual salary, right? 10 times your annual salary. So I know that's quite a lot of information to absorb, but here's how we have made it easy for you to get started. We'll now showcase a short demo on a digital wealth tool on Maybank to you that you can use to help you get started on financial planning. The demo is related to how you can win the 500 ringgit prize and special gift, which I will announce later. So let's take a look at this tool called the Maybank to You Financial Goal Simulator.
Everybody knows it's important to save, but did you know that over time, your savings can decrease in value due to inflation? This means that in the future, the prices of food and other necessities will become higher. That's why your savings need to keep up. To help you better plan for your financial future, we've created the Financial Goal Simulator. It's a tool that calculates how much you need to set aside in order to make your money work for you towards achieving your financial goals. Click on the link below to learn more, or just log in and try it out now. After you've logged in, you'll be presented with 3 goals: to retire comfortably, to have an education fund for yourself or your children, and to grow your wealth. If your goal is just to have some funds stashed aside for your future, or to be prepared for any big expenses such as starting your own business and buying a house, you may select Grow My Wealth. Here, you're required to define your goal. If you have your figures in mind, just fill them in. If you don't, not to worry. You can hover your cursor over the question marks to get a better idea of the information that's needed. Now let's start with the goal target amount. Let's say your goal is to have 50,000 ringgit by the time you reach 35 years old, assuming you are 25 years old today. For your initial deposit, you can key in any amount from 0 to 100 ringgit or more, based on what you can afford. Once you're done, just click on Show Simulation. You can always edit the figures again later. Right away, you'll see a customized plan for your goal. On the left, the simulator suggests that in order to achieve 50,000 ringgit in 10 years, you'll need to invest at least 339 ringgit every month. On the right, the graph shows a timeline, starting from your current age all the way to your goal target age. The 3 colored lines each indicates a potential economic outcome. Green is great, yellow is average, and red is low. Unlike holding cash or having fixed deposits, investing involves risks, and the market may fluctuate. The simulation that you're seeing is the average market performance based on our past data. Under the graph, we can see that in the best economic outcome, you have a 25% chance of overachieving your initial goal with at least 63,000 ringgit. But if the market doesn't go as planned, you'll still have 75% chance to have at least 39,000 ringgit. While this is more of a general gauge, you can further customize your goal by clicking on Make and Edit. Here, there are 2 main fields that you can edit: your risk profile and your monthly investment. Let's start with your risk profile. Your risk profile is your willingness and ability to take risks with your money. Are you more willing to make bold moves for higher returns? Or do you prefer to avoid investment decline at the price of foregoing potential capital appreciation? Here at Maybank, we know that everyone is unique, and so we've created 5 levels of risk profiles for your selection: conservative, moderately conservative, balanced, moderately aggressive, and aggressive. Thus, you can choose the profile that best suits your risk appetite. Next, let's look at your monthly investment. This is the amount of money that you can afford to put aside for your investment every month. The more you invest each month, the higher your chance of achieving your goal. Apart from those 2 fields, you can always edit your desired goal target amount, age, and initial deposit on the top yellow box. Feel free to test out different scenarios on the Financial Goal Simulator and keep editing until you're comfortable with your plan. And remember to click on Save This Goal every time you see a simulation that you like. After that, you can fill in your details and click Confirm if you want to be connected with our experts to better understand your risk profile and receive newsletters on investment tips, products, and more. Otherwise, just leave the fields empty and click confirm to end the simulation. Before we end this video, remember that financial planning doesn't just stop at planning. It requires your discipline and constant monitoring. For more helpful articles and step-by-step guides to assist you in your journey towards your financial goal, visit our content hub at maybanktoyou.com.my/financialgoals/articles. Here, you can explore other financial goals and learn about the benefits of goal-based investing as opposed to traditional investment. All of our resources are available to you anytime, anywhere. Remember, a good start is half the battle. So let us help you get started with your financial goal with Maybank Financial Goal Simulator.
So what do you think, guys? We hope you see just how easy it is to get started. And remember, if you need any help, all you need to do is to make an appointment on EasyQ and talk to our personal financial advisors or any advisors at a Maybank branch near you, right? If you like, we can also conduct a virtual meeting with you. Just remember to stay safe if you have to make any essential trips. Now, as promised at the start of the show, I am pleased to share with you a special digital wealth promotion from today, August 26th, to October 15th. All you have to do is perform your wealth report on Maybank to You to gain entries to a lucky draw where we will randomly select 10 winners to win a prize worth 500 ringgit. What's more, the first 100 customers who join Maybank Privilege and complete their wealth report on Maybank to You will also receive a special gift worth 50 ringgit. So hurry and log on to Maybank to You to perform your wealth report today. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you for watching. Thank you, Wei Yin, and thank you, Yiling. And I wish all of you a good night and a happy week ahead. Join us next week as we talk about how to accumulate and turbocharge your wealth. Until next time, take care, stay safe, and don't forget to tell your friends and family about this series and the importance of financial planning. See you next week.